This is part 4 and the final part of the interview with Kendall. This really talks about the post-bankruptcy and what that experience was like. It was very difficult. Kendall dives in deep of the super long days, how he was just trying to do right by the employees, the brands, anybody who was impacted by this. He did the best he could, and it really talks about that time period of post-bankruptcy.
Because I didn't know what I've never been through a bankruptcy. I don't, I
Sure.
was just kind of told, and the management, when it's management, like the private equity team said, hey, look, we want security there and want to shut it down. They probably have been through those experiences before. It was instead of being filed as a Chapter 11, which would mean a restructuring opportunity. Plenty of, like what I said before with Sportsman's Warehouse, they were filed as a Chapter 11. And it was determined that we would file as a Chapter 7 because I remember the rationale is that there isn't enough money because Chapter 11 bankruptcies are very expensive, and you end up having to work on a cash-only basis typically. So, and you have to basically go out to everyone that you owe money to, negotiate terms, and then the judge has to accept those terms. And that takes time and a lot of money. And quite frankly, I think the private equity team had given a lot. They had given a lot, and they had pushed hard and a ton of effort. And I think the other partner was kind of like, dude, cut bait. Like we are blowing cash and time and stuff. And that's just my perception.
Yeah.
Was that actually the case? I don't know. So they filed a Chapter 7, which basically dissolved everything. The one thing that they did at the end is they used some of the cash to create a severance opportunity for everybody. That was based off off whatever your salary was. You would get a severance, and I can't remember if it was a little bit of time. That was announced in the when the the CEO and the lead for the primary principal for the private equity team told that to the entirety of the employees in the break room there, and it was told that they needed to sign a like a release form for the severance, and some legal stuff. Whenever you get a severance. So I remember I walked over to Mark's desk, Mark Springer, and I was like, "Hey man, do you need help with any of this?" And he's like, "No, I'm just trying." He was basically taking the severance amount, putting it on these sheets, having each employee sign, and then he was to collect those, and just so that everything was kind of done in order. And I said to him, he said to me, he goes, "Well, you need to sign one of these too." And I was like, "I got a severance." It's the first time that I was like, "No, come on, man! Like I don't need a severance." Now remember, I said earlier that I had voluntarily, as a part of me just extracting myself from day-to-day business, I had rolled my salary down, and so my severance, as it was, the narrative that came out made it appear that I had this like exorbitant amount of severance, and it's listed right there in the bankruptcy papers, $3,900. That was my severance. Okay, and the way that it was portrayed, in my opinion, was that it was thousands and tens of hundreds of thousands that I had made off like a bandit. And what's not disclosed, and it's a little frustrating, is that I had lent a lot of money to the business to try and keep it afloat.
Yeah.
And my severance was pittance.
Yeah.
What I didn't tell, hesitate to even share this, but when Mark said to me, like, "This is your severance," I was like, "Oh man." My first reaction was, "Geez, I don't need a severance." And I turned to him and I said, "How much is your mortgage?" And he told me. And I said, "I want you and Nikki to not have to worry about your mortgage for a bit." And I said, "I'm giving my severance to you." And I gave it to him. Now listen, I'm not trying to get an award or anything or pat myself on the back, but I just want to demonstrate, like, I didn't want that. I wish that the private equity team had not. They just went down the payroll and just our CFO, who was they just said here. But Anyway, so
Well,
I left.
to add to that, you did that for me and my wife, Lisa. So you actually gave away your severance twice. So you're not very good at math, Kendall. And you're not going to say this, and I'm going to say it, is what would follow over the next few weeks and months. You were paying employees who couldn't find work yet, whatever you could, to come help pack boxes, move boxes, build pallets, be trained on machines we've never been trained on, and get this thing in a place. So it didn't end on that Friday. It didn't end on that Monday. It didn't end with that last order going out to that last customer. I don't know if it will end with you. I think it will go until the end of your life, which sounds morbid, but you're a giver and you gave a lot over those preceding months. And you were very aware of how people were doing. Are they landing? And you gave whatever you could. Hey, keep track. I heard you. Keep track of your hours. I'll Venmo you. Whatever you tried to do. So it is deeply ironic that people look at those papers and say, "Oh, look at this." It's like, seriously, dude, if you only knew. And that's why we're together here, is if you only knew. Well, now you know.
The other thing that happened, as you just alluded to, is I was not aware. A couple days before the filing, it was shared with me by some of the members of the PE firm that I had a personal guarantee on the building, and I was under the assumption, and shame on me, that when the private equity team came in and they bought control of the company, and that because we went through all the brands, we actually missed one, and I ended up having to pay that company. One of the brands, it's a footwear brand, I had to pay them out of my pocket because when we switched over everything from the entity that Mark and I had to the new corporate entity, we missed a company, and that never got switched over. And the day after the filing, they came after me, and I had negotiated a settlement with them that was only a couple $1,000s less than what they were owed. So that one came and bit me in the butt. And what I was told a couple days before the filing was that I had a personal guarantee on the building. And I was like, wait a second. Like, did the lease not ever get switched over? After the filing, it was conveyed to me that the lease never got switched over to the corporate entity, and that me and Mark were now the proud owners of I think we had 15 or 16 more months lease at $40,000+ per month. So I suddenly became the proud owner of a lease, and Mark, I called Mark and said, listen, this is a situation that I find myself in and that we find ourselves in. I'm not asking for anything. This is, what he's going through some stuff with his son, and his son was in a bad way. And he said something to the fact that I can't focus on this. And I said, I'm not telling you to focus on this. I've got it. I've got your back. We've always had each other's back. He's taken care of my family. I've taken care of his. But I said, I need you to financially meet me in the middle. Because if this goes much farther, I'm going to have to start selling things, real estate or whatever. Because I can't fund this. I don't have a job anymore. Like, yeah. I'm making zero. And to your point, I suddenly realized that and thankfully, the prior CEO, he had started the pathway for us to actually leave that building, because we were intending to go into a 3PL situation. Sure. Because we had trimmed down the many brands. We were going to try and liquidate inventory and then basically be in a 3PL. So the day before all the employees were told, some people came through and looked at the building, and then 2 days after the filing, that realtor contacted the former CEO, who then pushed it kind of to me and said, "Hey, I'm kind of I don't really need to be intermediary anymore because the company doesn't exist anymore, but you're responsible for the building now. Good for you. And so I ended up connecting with the real estate agent, and he basically said, listen, if you want this deal, these guys are interested. If you want this deal to happen, all the racking has to stay and for this deal to happen, and you need to get out of here as soon as possible. So because the bank was unsecured, see, if the bank was secured, they would have taken the building, they would have taken all the inventory, it would become their property. But because the bank was unsecured and everyone is unsecured, all the inventory and all the assets became property of the court. So suddenly now I have a court trustee that can dictate what can or can't happen. And I'm looking at all this inventory, and my initial thought was, I got to figure out a way to get all this freaking inventory out of this building, get this building patched up. I mean, I hired a drywall guy to replace all those holes that people had driven into walls with forklifts. And I was like, I gotta do this. I didn't, and so we actually never told this potential tenant that the company went under. They thought that we had moved to that we were moving to a 3PL.
Yeah.
The fear was that if they knew that we had filed bankruptcy, that they would back away from the deal, just not to get involved with it. It became pretty much a 12 to 18 hour workday for me, 6 days a week. And then, like you said, hiring, I petitioned and went back to every single employee and said, listen, normally in a bankruptcy, the court or the bank would they would take all this, they would hire a team, they'd come in, they'd inventory the product, inventory computers and desks and chairs and forklifts and all the other stuff, and then start liquidating, right?
Yeah.
But because now I was the landlord, I started things in motion, petitioned the court and said, listen, I need to meet with you because I'm now the leaseholder, and I need this building emptied. And he was pretty much like, well, who's going to empty it? And I said, I'm your guy. Like, I'm just going to do this. Because the bigger nugget was I got to get out from under this lease.
Yeah.
So I started paying people. I just hired anyone that would come that understood our warehouse management system. We worked with keeping the warehouse management system in place so that we could keep integrity in all the inventory. I also found I found a hole, and it is a clause in the bankruptcy court law that states if you receive product within a certain period of time under a Chapter 7, then that product can be returned to the original vendor. The example that I read online was if a bakery orders flour and within a 45-day period, if there's not a secured lender, which there was no secured lender. If it's secured, it's 20 days. If it's unsecured, it's 45 days. If the bank is unsecured, if there's no secured, anything received in the last 45 days can be claimed by the vendor. So in the example, well, let's just take an example. Asiac, they sent us tripods and product.
Yep.
Within that last 45 days. Therefore, anything that was unsold, that was still in inventory, he has a right to claim that. The thing is this court trustee told me, he said, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've only ever seen one case in 30 years that someone has used this claim to claim product in a Chapter 7. He goes, it's interesting. This is like 3 weeks later. He goes, It's interesting. It's already happened 4 times. It's already happened 4 or 5 times in this case. And I said, guilty. These are companies I care about. And I had reached out initially to Crispy and then to any company that I thought qualified.
Yeah.
I started reaching out to them saying, listen, there's this bankruptcy clause. You guys can claim product that's unsold if it was received in the last 45 days. Mystery Ranch. So I started employing employees out of my pocket to help organize reports, help understand how much product could be reclaimed by these rightful owners using this code in the bankruptcy law. And I've had a lot of people say, like, why did you do this? And the truth is it's because it was within my power and it felt like it was the right thing to do. My goal at that point was selfish, sure, to get out of that building. But I also knew that I couldn't sleep with I couldn't look myself in the mirror if I hadn't tried to help as many of those companies as possible, small companies. And I remember about 2 weeks later, I went on a trip with my wife. We'd had this we'd never been to San Diego, and it was her birthday, and I'd had this trip. I almost canceled it. I remember I asked you and a couple other people, can you please go to the warehouse on that Friday so that I can go on this trip with my wife, weekend trip. And I remember I had some anxiety about the narrative that was being out. I hadn't seen it. I had friends that told me, don't read what people are saying about you. I don't really understand. I mean, I do understand, but I have a hard time getting into Instagram DMs. I finally did a few weeks later and found some really unsavory messages to me. People had commented on past posts on Instagram, some pretty mean things. But I had friends and my son told me, Dad, don't go read the forums. I looked at Rockslide for a couple of pages when it was on. I was like, wow, it's already up to page like 18. I read 17 and 18 on that thread, and it was so funny, some of the things that were saying, and it was sad, some of the things that were being said about me, and I just didn't have time for that. This is my full focus. But I knew that weekend I remember I watched, I think, the second of 3 videos that was put out, and it bothered me. But I remember talking to my wife, and I said, babe, if in the New Testament it talks about it's in the Sermon on the Mount where Christ says, if someone demands, and I'm praying it is wrong, if someone demands your coat of you, give him your cloak also, or vice versa. And I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter what people are saying about me. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What really matters is if someone's out for blood or someone feels like I have done injustice, I will give them more than what I will pay them, not in injustice or anger. I will pay them in additional kindness. And I said, if I've already reached out to like 4 or 5 companies, I'd actually reached out to about 7 or 8, and I think there were 4 or 5 that qualified. And I said to myself, I told my wife, I said, if I don't care what this gentleman, and I hadn't really ever met this gentleman before, I said, I'm going to reach out to him because that's just the right thing to do. If I help all these other companies and I don't help him, what does that say about me? So I did. I reached out to him. He was like, his first response was, how are you even? He goes, you're the last person I expect to hear from. And I said, listen, I'm not calling for you to retract or anything like that. I don't care about that. Yeah. I'm just telling you I have a way to help you. And he was like, how are you still in the building? And I said, well, I'm paying rent now on this building for the next 15 months unless I can get it emptied. And I've got permission from the court to compile all this inventory, find a new warehouse. I leased out another warehouse to then transport all this inventory into. It took me almost 2 months to get all this project done. Mark and I paid the rent. But I said, listen, it just, the bank was unsecured. I explained all that stuff to him. He said on that call, man, I owe you an apology probably 4 or 5 times. And I said, listen, it's okay. I'm not mad. I'm not upset. A little hurt, yes. But I said, the thing is you only have 3 or more days to file. So it's really important I get this to you. You need to file this claim with the court. Here's kind of a form letter that I created, shared it with him, shared it with a bunch of different companies, and it was able to save some small companies and some big companies a lot of money in getting their product back so that they hadn't been paid for. That was shipped within that period of time. There were a lot of companies, unfortunately, that weren't in that same boat. Their product had been shipped prior to 45 days, and it was just they've had to go through the court process. So yeah, it was a long period of time. I was at the lowest of lows. I remember there's a period where I probably cried daily. The stress was extremely heavy. Felt like I was never going to be able to make it. Employees, sadly for me, they started getting hired and finding jobs and dropping like flies. I remember there was one in particular day. There was a day that you came, and there were only 2 people that came that day. And I was just like, wow, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't. I'm never going to get to the end of this.
It was such a heavy lift. And I remember I would go to the warehouse and I just would look around and I'm like, oh man, if I'm feeling it, I can't imagine what you're feeling. Because it was,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, emptying 2 Costco's worth of product that's very compact. It's not even displayed cute.
No.
I mean, it's like
Little bins stacked with stuff.
big stuff, small
And
stuff.
I tried to organize it in ways that brands that might be interested in buying back their product, and I've honestly been facilitating those things with the court, so that and the court's he's been so sympathetic to the reality that some of these small brands want to buy their product back to protect their brand,
Sure.
even if they were owed money or not owed money. And so we tried to do it in a way that was organized, but as fast as possible. And finally got it out, got the deal done. The new tenant signed. I've kind of had to babysit them over the first couple weeks, and then the last point of closure, like 2.5 weeks ago, my brother-in-law and I went up to the warehouse on the request from the new tenants that are now my subtenants. I'm still on the hook until March of 27. So I just hope they don't go out of business and hope they stay healthy. But at their request, I went up with my brother-in-law and we took the vinyl sign off of those big upper windows. And I think that is the last time I will ever go in that building. But it was closure. I mean, yeah, I paid my brother-in-law out of my pocket, but yeah, I listen. I've learned a ton of lessons. And I've learned a lot about who I would want to be in business with, who I wouldn't, how I would structure a business, how I wouldn't, how I'd be careful about taking investment dollars and why, how I would start out businesses. But the reality is along the way, like I said in that video, like my payday was not at the end of a rainbow. Like the relationships, the life I've lived for 18 years, the people I've been involved with, the love I felt, and even some of the anger I felt towards me, like all of that is of such value. And my friend Justin, if I can just kind of in closing, he sent me he's a banker, so he understands the whole process, and he was just astounded. He didn't realize that the bank was unsecured, and when he came by about a month and a half afterwards, my desk was the only desk remained intact. Everything else had been kind of moved to a different area, and my desk was back in that lonely room that we called home for a while. And he's like, "What are you doing in here?" And I told him about the unsecured lender, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And he sent me a text later, and he said this, and this really summarizes like my experience in the hunting space. You know, owning and running 2 very successful businesses. One that persists now under the ownership of Mark, and one that's now just a memory. And he said this is never. He's talking about me and my journey, and about Camofire and BlackOvis. And he said this has never been about business outcome. It is about the way this journey is shaping you, and the impact you're having on the people around you. This is all about you becoming your best and helping others to use their agency better. And I wrote at the end of this, it is about who we become by doing the work more than the outcome of the work itself. And that's I wish I would have understood that the outcome was not some amount of cash or whatever. And I knew that. But he has created for me like a vision of what really it was all about. And if I venture into another business in this industry or not, what my next adventure and business anticipation is not about the business outcome. It'll be about the person I become and the way I'm able to help others. And so some of my decisions at the end and after the end were certainly, there was some selfishness to it because I just needed to get out of that stupid building and get out from underneath the weight of a whale on my back. But it was also, I think I made a lot of decisions on trying to just help others.
Yeah.
And to that end, I'm still, I told the trustee of the court, I said, hey, I'll be of assistance to you at on any step of the way. There's a lot of things that I know that you will have to discover, and I'm willing to help so long as you ask of me. And I told him I'll be here till the bitter end. And which means that that warehouse that I leased is still housing the remaining product that is soon to be sold to the bidders, and
Yeah.
who knows what will happen with that, and who knows if the website will live again. I don't know if someone's going to buy that asset and try and restart it, and yeah, those are unknowns, but
Thank you for
been a wild ride.
Walking through that. I think there's going to be people that are going to appreciate that, and whether they're in hunt,
And they may not. There may be people that are like, "You're still a joker," and
I think though even people not in hunt, it's a story for sure, and I think it inspires others to act or be thoughtful of their actions. I also think there is this sense of not being driven by outward validation, and that's something personally I've struggled with. I've struggled with imposter syndrome. I've struggled with multi-personality and disassociation, and I I hear you talking, I've come to recently realize I think the most important validator in our life is Jesus Christ. And I don't know if someone's
for sure
listening to this and, whether you're a Christian or not, but if you are always giving out your legitimacy and your validation to others, that is the greatest challenge you will constantly be incurring upon yourself. And I've flown with you. I was in the Dallas airport with you, and some guy walks up and he's like, "Oh man, you're Kendall. You got the pants and you got the crispy boots, and and that's just who you are." And I've seen that, and you can't go anywhere with Kendall, especially Hunt Expo, and expect to get anything done. But and I see that, and I'm like, oh, it's cool and it's fun, whatever. But I do see you as somebody who isn't so driven by constant outward validation. But I know that this has been a insanely traumatic experience, and it's probably hard to not look at that and be like the comments and the things. But truthfully, just recently I've come to know that like the Savior is our best validator, and everything else doesn't matter. It's just noise. Because if we're putting someone out so much in others, it's giving up so much control. And I think that's just kind of how I take away a lot of what you said. I appreciate it so much.
His grace is sufficient for all of us. Listen, it's like those people on the receiving end of this bankruptcy, they're praying to the same God for relief, and I'm praying to the same God for help. And we're on two different sides. So it's like, who wins? The reality is we all win with Christ. And our perspective is more based upon our journey and our vision and how he provides clarity to that. I felt saved by his help so many times through that. That's probably those 2 months of getting out of that warehouse was probably the hardest I've grinded in my entire life. Like I was ragged, but he came to my rescue so many ways, so many little ways that my prayers were answered in just the most uncanny and unrealistic and unnatural ways, and small ways that had I not been humble enough to recognize them, I think I would have missed them. It's been a wild ride, and I'm grateful for the kindness that people have expressed. So many good people in the industry reached out via text and such and thanked me and just felt bad for me. And this weekend was good at Hunt Expo. It was hard to go there. It was really hard. I felt like an outsider a bit, which is weird. But I was standing there talking to Drew and Sean from Tricer, and Drew was mentioning something, and Sean was thanking me for what I helped them, and Drew was thanking me for what I had helped them retrieve. And he had been in the construction industry, and he's like, this just happens. I'm used to this stuff happening, and we just move on. And he had told his company, we're moving on. And then suddenly, like, they got an influx of product that had fit within that parameter, and I helped them get that. But as I'm talking to those guys, this gentleman walks by. I don't know him, don't know who he is. He looked at me and he said, I really missed your company. And he said, you guys did a good thing, and I'm sad it's gone. And He just kept walking. And I said, that means more to me than you know, thank you. And that is that kind of trust and that sort of relationship with someone I've never known is why that business was so beautiful and why I miss it the same. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it and to get as much of my perspective out there and more for me but also for so many that are wondering and if there's still contention against like how it happened, I completely respect that and it's fine. But I'm psyched to see what my next adventure looks like, and I don't know what that is yet, so we'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, you're gonna have to stay for dinner. My wife's got that soup down there.